Hey everybody, so I'm just going to show you a little bit of a peek behind the scenes so you can see what a day looks like when I'm recording. This particular one is going to be a little book that I'm recording for one of my clients on Fiverr, and they've asked me to do a facts book, so we're going to take a little journey into fact land. I really love books like this because I actually get to learn quite a lot from these books, and it's always a lot of fun. I'm going to show you a little bit of my recording process and how I cut things up. I generally do something called punch and roll, and that allows me to really kind of do a lot of my editing during the recording, so I don't have to worry about going back and cutting out little pieces and tearing it all apart. It takes a little bit of setup, but it's really useful.
Until he was found in 1974. The ancient Greeks believed redheads
became vampires when they died. Why would the Greeks believe something so crazy based on someone's hair color? That's because, in ancient Greece, people usually had olive-toned skin and dark hair. Redheads, on the other hand, were sensitive to light and very pale, which sounded suspiciously like vampires to the Greeks. So, they decided the only logical conclusion was that redheads must become vampires after death. The U.S. flag was designed by a 17-year-old. His name was Robert G. Heft, and he created the design in 1958 for a school project. He included 2 more stars on the flag than there were states at the time, because he anticipated that Hawaii and Alaska would be joining the United States. Spoiler alert, he was right. Unfortunately, he only got a B- for the assignment. I bet his teacher felt silly later on. Heft didn't give up, though. He sent his design to the White House and was eventually phoned by President Eisenhower himself. The president told him his flag design would become the official design from then on. So don't be too upset if you get a bad grade. The Oxford... Nope. So this is one of those times I go back a little bit. I can listen to it again and then jump back in.
Nope. And if you get a bad grade.
The University of Oxford is way older than the Aztec Empire. In the year 1096, the University of Oxford opened its doors to students. It's true, Oxford is that old. Now you may imagine the famous Aztec Empire as even older, but in actuality, it's said that the empire was founded around 1325. They're both super old, but the There's another one. Apparently, University of Oxford is kicking my ass.
Was founded around
1925. They're both super old, but the University of Oxford is even older. People were once used as alarm clocks. Before cell phones or even clocks, there was a job some people had where they would knock on someone's door or window to wake them up. They were called knocker-uppers and would use long sticks to reach people's windows to wake them. Sometimes, knocker-uppers would even throw rocks or shoot peas at windows. You could hire someone to be your personal... I ran out of breath.
Or shoot peas at
windows. You could hire someone to be your personal alarm clock, but unfortunately, you couldn't press the snooze button on them. In World War I, the French built a fake Paris to fool German bombers. The year was 1917, and the city of Paris was dangerously close to the intense fighting on the front lines. The German army was sending bomber aircraft during the night to make surprise attacks on civilians. It was a scary time to be in Paris. However, an Italian engineer named Fernand Jacopozzi. So this is one of the fun parts of the job. I get to go look this up and see pronunciation. Well, I'm gonna go get my keyboard. So the search process for finding what a word sounds like if it's more obscure, you could go to Merriam-Webster if it's just a basic English word. 4VO is a really good one. 4VO specifically has the ability for people to upload their recordings of the word to the site, and then people can vote on whether or not that was a good pronunciation. Whereas howtopronounce.com is going to have a digital estimation of the voice, and then people have the option to record their voice. So not as reliable, but definitely an option in terms of finding what you need to find. Well, it was totally wrong. I thought it was an Italian name, but it looks like it's a French one. So what I'm going to do is I went to howtopronounce.com, and There's a few different options. You can go to Forvo, you can go to How to Pronounce, you can go to YouTube, though those ones are a bit weirder. You're not guaranteed to get a good one. Okay, so. Jacopozy. Fernand Jacopozy. There we go. Cool. So that's how we pronounce that.
Attacks on civilian Italian engineer named Fernand Jacob.
Oh, that's why I thought it was an Italian engineer. Google thinks he's French, but the book thinks he's Italian.
However, an Italian engineer.
There we go.
Was a scary time to be in
Paris. However, an Italian engineer named Fernand Jacopozy came up with a brilliant plan. He suggested that the Parisians build a second Paris, a fake city, in order to fool the German bombers. The word freelancer comes from self-employed, sword-carrying mercenaries. A mercenary is a soldier who will fight for hire. Lance is just another name for a spear. So a soldier who's hired and uses a spear. Ran out of breath, so we're going to go back real quick. Fix that.
For a spear. So
a soldier
who's hired.
So a soldier who's hired and uses a spear or a sword should be called a freelancer, don't you think? Nowadays, a freelancer is still a self-employed person, but most likely isn't a mercenary anymore. They can be writers, construction workers, artists, or consultants, and work without a long-term commitment to any one employer. There's a world record for the person who holds the most world records. Yes, you read that correctly. His name is Ashrita Furman. He's broken over 600 world records and currently holds 200. As a young boy, he developed a fascination with world records. I don't like that one. I think I said kind of a W-E-R, so I'm going to jump back and I'm fix it.
Currently holds 200.
Holds 200. As a young boy, he developed a fascination with world records and decided to break some. Eventually, he became the person to hold records such as the fastest mile on a pogo stick record and the longest time to hula hoop underwater. Those are only a few of his hundreds of broken records. The Titanic could have been saved by a key. This awful tragedy is well known. The Titanic ran into an iceberg and was sunk. I didn't really like how I gave a pretty big pause after ran, so I'm going to go back and fix that.
A key. This awful
tragedy is well known. The Titanic ran into an iceberg and was sunk. However, this accident could have been avoided if someone had simply looked through a pair of binoculars, but the binoculars were locked within the crow's nest, which is the highest point on a ship. The only person who had the keys wasn't on the ship, so nobody could get the binoculars and spot the iceberg before the ship crashed into it. Who would have thought a small key? Ran out of breath again. That's like one of the biggest things that causes me to re-record. Sometimes it's errors, but most of the time I just can't finish a sentence.
And spot the iceberg before the ship crashed into it.
Who would have thought a small key might have saved hundreds of people from tragedy? It was never said that the Titanic was unsinkable. When stories about the Titanic are told, storytellers never forget the line about the infamous ship being unsinkable. However, the creators of the Titanic never claimed that. In fact, the Titanic wasn't very unique or interesting to most of the population until it sank. One of the designers of the Titanic was on board when it sank. His original design included schematics for things on the ship that would save. Did it again.
On board when it sank.
His original design included schematics for things on the ship that would save hundreds of lives, but the other designers and owners refused to use them. Boy, he must have been cursing them. You've probably seen lots of drawings of pilgrims at the first Thanksgiving. Can you picture what they're wearing? Well, you
Can you picture what
they're wearing? Well, if you imagine them in a black hat with a big buckle on it, you'd be mistaken. Despite popular images depicting them this way, the pilgrims didn't start wearing buckles on their hats until the 1800s, after the first Thanksgiving. People often made their clothes out of flour sacks during the Great Depression in the 1930s. So the companies that distributed these sacks
in the
1930s. So the companies that distributed these sacks made them brighter and more colorful to help people look fashionable. Ah, what a nice gesture. Though I can't imagine a flour sack was comfortable to wear. All right, guys. I'm going to cut it off there while I keep on recording, but I think that's a pretty good indication of how you do a recording for an audiobook. Stay tuned. I'll keep you in... No. I don't know how to sign out. This is Daniel Ryder out of the Daniel Ryder Voice Box, signing off.
Our trips to Georgia before we moved to Charlottesville were epic journeys into the Deep South. I remember them as adventures. Dad often wanted to go visit his mother, so we made this trip many times before we left Richmond in 1960.